With the Sigma Classics, Sigma have taken their fantastic range of cinema primes and removed and changed some of the coatings. This gives them a new low contrast look with significantly more flaring. And we recently made a video discussing these modern cinema lenses with a vintage aesthetic, and as part of that we filmed a whole bunch of lens tests going through each lens in the range. So we thought we would make these into a separate video for you. But if you haven't watched that main video, make sure you head over there with the link in the description. Now that video was made in this wider 2.35:1 aspect ratio, as we were featuring some anamorphic lenses in there, and this is actually filmed on one of those anamorphic lenses as well. So that's why this video and these tests are all in 2.35:1 aspect ratio, even though these are of course spherical lenses. Now the Sigma Classics come in the same comprehensive range of focal lengths as the originals, a 14, 20, 24, 28, 35, 40, 50, 85, 105 and 135mm. Now they're consistently T2.5 across the whole range, apart from either extreme end. Both the 14mm and the 135 are T3.5. Now this is a higher t-stop than the originals, not because the actual iris itself has changed, simply because the different coatings don't optimize the light anywhere near as much. You'll get the same amount of depth of field with these as you will with the originals at T1.5. The image is just going to be a stop darker. So let's look at some tests. To start with, let's put them side by side with the regular cinema primes on a normal shot with no flares. This shows you how similar they are in areas that we love from the originals. The sharpness, the bokeh, the fall off, it all looks identical. These are very sharp and detailed lenses, even wide open, with very clean and technically impressive bokeh rendition. The main obvious difference here though, which I'm sure you'll see straight away, is the contrast. The Classics have a very low contrast look to them because of those tweaked coatings of course. And as these clips play on and George holds the torch up, we can see the other main difference, which is the flaring. On the original Sigma Cines, flaring is very well under control indeed. On the 50mm here, we can barely see any flaring at all. On the Classics, it's the complete other end of the spectrum. Just look at all that flare. As we move through the focal lengths, you can really see how this flare changes. With every new focal length, the distribution of the flare is different. They're all very strong, but how defined the orbs and rings are, how much ghosting there is across the image, and therefore how much you can see of the subject, and whether the flare is stronger by the light source itself or at the mirrored end of the flare, it all changes dramatically, which is a large part of what makes these lenses so enjoyable to use. Let's face it, if you aren't looking for strong flares, you aren't going to be using these lenses. And if you are looking for strong flares, this gives you a whole menu of options to choose from to decide what looks best for each situation. Some of my favourites which I'd like to highlight are the 105mm, which has a lovely soft large flare with two multicoloured smaller orbs that just dance close to the light source. I also really like the 28mm on the wider end, which has multiple pronounced round coloured orbs both near the light source and at the far mirrored end of the flare. This makes the flare much more noticeable and feels really quite almost futuristic to me, the sort of flares that you would feel at home with in sci-fi films, for example. In comparison to that, the 35mm has a much larger flare, with a more noticeable orb being the single silver one at the mirrored end, and personally I think this has a much more classy and glossy feel to it, more like a perfume commercial or a period drama for example. But these are of course very subjective, and a lot of this will just come down to personal taste. In most other areas, the lenses perform just like you would expect a high-quality modern cinema lens to. There's minimal distortion, even at the very wide-angle focal lengths. I can't see any problems with chromatic aberration or anything like that. And the bokeh is very circular across the board with minimal onion skinning. There is some breathing though, which varies between focal lengths. It's more noticeable at wider focal lengths, especially the 14mm. The 20mm does perform much better though, so if you need to do a focus pull with a wide angle, I would recommend using the 20mm. Breathing at longer focal lengths is there, but far more under control and isn't really that noticeable. But for the most part, these are exactly what Sigma claim they are. They're clean, modern lenses with a low contrast look and exaggerated flaring. Let me know what you think of these tests and how the Sigma Classics perform in the comment section down below. And if you want to buy some for yourself, of course, just get in touch with the ProAV sales team, who would be happy to help. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.